Welcome to Spells and Spoilers, the podcast where we dive into all things supernatural. This season, we're starting with Charmed, so grab your spellbook and your popcorn, and let's get magical. Welcome to Spells and Spoilers, a rewatch and reread podcast. I'm Aleacia.
And I'm Elizabeth. This season, we'll go minute by minute through every episode of Charmed, giving you all the details and diving into the magic, the drama, and everything in between.
That's right. Each week, we're going to break down one episode of Charmed, and today we're recapping Season 1, Episode 12, The Wendigo.
But first, before we get started, just a quick reminder to follow us on social media, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a review if you're enjoying our deep dive.
We start the episode near the park. Piper's car is broken down, and she's on the phone talking to Phoebe. Piper is saying, "Of course I know what a jack is, Phoebe. I just don't know how to use it. It's not like I've ever got a flat tire before. I mean, this doesn't happen to me every day." Okay, everybody should know how to change their own tire.
Fact.
Embarrassing.
Yes, I took an automotive class to specifically learn how to change tires, among other things, like, put engines together and stuff.
See, what I say usually is that I do know how to change a tire. I can change a tire. I just never have to. I just stand on the road and go, "Oh my gosh," and then like 5 cars will pull up.
Somebody show up. Exactly. One of the benefits of being a female, let's be honest. But I try to convince my boys to take an automotive class, and apparently it's not offered anymore. And I'm like, well, that's lame.
It's still offered at our school, but interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, but Phoebe says, "Piper, relax. I used to date a mechanic. I will walk you through it. Put the jack under the Jeep, and then you put the handle in the base and ratchet it up and down. It's very easy." Piper says she doesn't think she has a handle, but there's a long wooden spoon in the back. Phoebe tells her that it's not going to work, and she looks at Prue and she goes, "She's looking for a long wooden spoon." Can you believe this? So Piper finds the spoon, she sticks it in the jack, and the spoon immediately breaks. And she goes, "Oh, it didn't work."
You think?
Nah. Phoebe tells her to stay there, and they will go get her. Piper says, "No, I can do it. I can figure it out." Phoebe tells her that she's stranded, all alone, and the only thing she has to protect herself is a wooden broken spoon. Okay, but, that's kind of like a wooden stake. So you could defend yourself against a vampire, I guess.
Right, exactly.
Piper says, "And I have the power to freeze. I'm fine. It's better than mace. Okay, I gotta go before my battery dies. I gotta call the auto club. I'll meet you there in a little bit." Phoebe, tells her to wait, but Piper hangs up anyway. So to Prue, she says she is literally out of her mind. Prue says, "All right, give her 15 minutes and then call back." They agree to that plan. We cut back to Piper. She's calling the auto club, or she's calling the operator first. How long's it been since you called an operator?
Are they even,
I don't think they're a thing
service
anymore.
Still?
I don't think so.
Huh. It's been a good minute, yes.
Yeah, so the operator asks what city. Piper tells him San Francisco. She's looking for the auto club. And we see something lurking in the bushes. Back to Prue and Phoebe. Phoebe says, "Now, back to what we were talking about. What do you think?" Prue says, "Well, I think it's a good idea." Phoebe says, "Great." And Prue says, "And I think it's a bad idea." And at this point, we don't really know what they're talking about. Phoebe says, "How's it a bad idea? You need extra help for the auction, and I need a job." Prue says, "Well, not only are we family, but we live together, and I don't think that my wardrobe can take the assault of your daily needs." Phoebe says, "Well, I'm great with phones, better with people, very computer friendly, and with a paycheck, I could purchase new clothes. So by hiring me, you'd actually be expanding your wardrobe, not decreasing it, and I'd be eternally grateful." Prue asks if she really wants to work at Buckland's, and Phoebe says, "When opportunity knocks, I answer the door." Prue tells her that the job is very demanding because auctions can be very stressful. Phoebe says, "I love a challenge." Prue tells her that there are long hours, and Phoebe says, "Overtime is my friend." No, it's not. Let's just all be honest with yourselves. Phoebe is like me, counting down the minutes. She says, "Ooh, plus, I just thought of something else. With my premonitions, I might just be able to get you the straight dope without a trip to the office water cooler." Prue tells her not to push it, and Phoebe asks what she thinks. And Prue says, "Can you start tomorrow?" Phoebe says yes, and she says, "Hey, can you give me a ride?" So back to Piper. Her phone is crackling. She has no signal. She says, "Hello, oh great." She looks around, and there's a phone booth her phone box.
Which was also in, like, a very random spot.
Yeah, just randomly in the middle of the park.
Like, it's not, like, on the side of the road where most of them would be.
Yeah.
It's
a plot convenience photo booth, okay?
Of course,
Or phone booth. She said, no problem, for I bear the power of 1. She starts walking over to the phone when she hears some twigs break. She stops, looks around, and then she continues walking when she hears leaves crunching. She stops again, and then she sees a large, hairy creature in the bushes, and then she runs to the phone box. What did you think about the visuals of the creature?
It was definitely late 90s.
Yeah.
Like, they're not good, obviously, but it's what I would expect for the 90s.
There's something, yep.
Yes.
She starts dialing the phone, and the creature starts hitting the phone box. Piper is screaming. It knocks over the whole phone box. Like, is it not cemented to the ground? How did it just fall over?
So, that was my thought, too. However, I think they're trying to portray the creature as being super strong.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, if that was the case, then I feel like it should have shattered the first impact.
Yeah.
Instead of several impacts, or 1 or 2.
Listen,
you know?
The glass is also super strong, okay? Yeah. It's like bulletproof glass. Oh, gosh. So she lays there, she's like waiting for something to happen. All of a sudden, it puts its hand through the glass and scratches her on the arm.
Which, where were the cuts from the glass?
Yeah.
Like, there would have been cuts or scratches or something from that. Like, they did not plan that very well.
Yeah. I do think we see some when we see her in the hospital, but not any there. So
that's where it scratches her. So I watched it back, and I only seen the scratches.
I thought she had some on her face.
I didn't see any.
Okay.
But maybe she did, and I just overlooked it. But the only ones that I noticed were the 3 on her arm, which were also poorly done.
She does try to freeze him, but it doesn't work. Because, as we know, Piper's freezing power only works within the one room. So since she's shut in the phone box, she's only freezing things inside the phone box. Mm-hmm. A guy with a flare gun appears, and he shoots it at the creature. It gets scared and runs back into the bushes. When the guy comes over to Piper, he tells her everything is going to be okay, and then we cut to credits.
So what do you think of the initial beginning?
I liked it, and I didn't like it. So I liked that it really jumped into the action. It, like, set the scene for everything. I just didn't like that they, like, portrayed Piper as dumb. Like, she doesn't know how to change a tire. She doesn't know how to, like, defend herself. She doesn't, like...
Yeah.
Give her a backbone a little bit.
Like a damsel in distress.
Piper would know how to change a tire, okay? What about you? Did you have any particular opinions?
No, I agree. I thought it was an interesting beginning. It draws you in. And again, I do agree that they did make Piper seem to be a little naive.
Yeah. After the credits, we're at the hospital when Prue and Phoebe walk up to reception. Phoebe asks for Piper, and we see Andy. So he greets them. Apparently he called them. Prue says, thanks for calling us. Andy says, hey, she's like my sister too. She's in here. They walk into the, like, triage room, and a doctor is putting a bandage on her arm. Piper says, oh my god, that's a lot of blood. And it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't, like, dripping blood or anything. It was like confined to the arm.
I feel like it should have been.
Yeah.
Like, with how thick they made him, like, it was very, like, makeup.
Yeah.
Like, it did not have any gooiness to it.
Yeah. Phoebe asks if she's okay, and Piper says, yeah, I'm fine. And then she looks at the doctor and says, if I pass out and I need a transfusion, I'm AB negative. It's very rare. It could be a problem.
And again, she has a thing with blood.
Yes.
She does not do well with blood.
Andy tells her to try not to look at it, and he says, just so you know, I'm AB neg too. Plus, I love good food. Perfect donor.
Did you notice his facial expression when Prue looked at Andy after he said that? It was very childish and comical, like.
Yeah.
Like where he, like, shook his head and stuck his tongue out.
Yeah. Prue asks if she needs stitches, and the doctor says, no, it's not that deep. But he tells Piper to follow up with her doctor in the morning, keep it dry, a little aspirin for the pain, and she'll be okay. Piper says, easy for you to say. The doctor says, you're all set, just sign this. So Prue takes the forms. Phoebe says, come here, baby. Everyone leaves the room as Phoebe puts her arm around Piper. Then they walk out of the room, too. And then she asks Piper why she didn't freeze him. Piper explains that she was trapped in the phone booth and her power doesn't work outside the room she's in. And Phoebe's like, oh, right. And, like, I get it. But also, like, I didn't need that explained to me. I figured it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess if that's your first episode ever of Charmed, then...
You may not know.
May not know, but why are you jumping in on the Wendigo? I don't know. But Piper sees the guy that had the flare gun walking it into the hospital. She says, oh my God, Billy. Billy asks how she's doing, and Piper tells everybody that Billy saved her life. Billy says, yeah, I'm just glad I got there in time. Andy says, yeah, I'd like to talk to you about that, along with that flare gun you just happened to show up with. Billy takes out a cigarette, and he goes to light it, and Prue's like, oh. She blows the lighter out and says, I don't think you can smoke in here. Duh. Billy says, oh, right. Look, it's no coincidence. I was there, Inspector. I heard about the murder last night. The creature. Andy says, the creature? Billy says, yes, that's right. And Piper agrees. When we see agent walk in, her name is Agent Fallon, she tells Billy to describe it and asks what he's doing there. Billy says, same thing you are, hunting that thing. Andy says, Prue, Piper, Phoebe Hallowell, Special Agent Fallon of the FBI. Phoebe says that that's cool. Piper asks, like, describe it. Oh, okay. Big, scary, strong. Kind of like a cross between a werewolf and Charles Manson.
Oh my gosh.
Fallon asks if it had yellow eyes and talon-like hands, and Piper says it did. Fallon says, can I talk to you, Inspector? So Andy nods, they walk away, and she says, Miss Hallowell is the first one to survive an attack. Andy says, unlike that poor guy we found last night with his heart ripped out of his chest. Fallon tells him that it's just like the killings in Chicago and New Orleans. Andy says that he sent in for the coroner's reports, and Fallon asks why. She says, I think it's pretty obvious this case is just out of your jurisdiction, Inspector. On the bright side, you don't want it. Andy asks why, and she says, this witness corroborates every other statement. According to their descriptions, this perp's neither animal or human. Wait, you didn't blink. I was expecting a response. Andy says, just tell me what I'm looking for. Agent Fallon says, you believe them, that it's not human? And Andy says, let's just say that recent experiences have taught me to keep an open mind.
Which, what is he implying? Because nothing really has happened that I can recall that he has observed.
Well, the sleep doctor, I think, too. Like, for sure.
But that was like a science thing.
Yeah, but, like, how is that happening? You know?
Yeah.
And I think he's, like, putting pieces together. Because, again, I think that the reason that he was, like, not for it when she did the truth spell is because that was the consequence of the spell. Mm-hmm. I don't think that, like, I think he's actually fine with it. I don't think he actually cares.
I agree. I think if she were to give him another chance and actually talk to him.
And not give him 30 seconds to think about it.
And no interference, I think he would be all for it.
Yeah.
But, again, I keep going back to what has Andy been through or seen to make him believe that there are supernatural beings out there.
Yeah. Yeah, because he did come into the first episode, like, already raring to go.
Yeah, talking about witches.
Yeah. Anyways, Prue asks Billy how he knew to use the flare gun, and Billy says it's afraid of fire. She asks how he figured that out, and he says, because when it attacked us, me and my fiancée Laura, we were camping at Lake Michigan, and I grabbed a log from the fire. It freaked, took off, but not before it ripped Laura's heart out. It might as well have taken mine too. I came here to kill it. We cut to the manor kitchen. Piper's sitting at the table looking through the Book of Shadows. Prue is also there. Piper is saying, if that thing wasn't demonic, I don't know what is. Prue says, it's not your fight, Piper. Just let Andy and that FBI agent handle it, okay? Piper says, can't. That thing tried to kill me. Besides, I was meant to be involved in this. I know that. It's not a coincidence. I got that flat. And then we see, like, oatmeal boiling over on the stove.
Like, why was there... I was like, is that supposed to be oatmeal? Is that porridge? Is that grits? Like, why was there so much?
There was so much of it.
I have a family of 6, and we would not be making that much. Oatmeal fills you up like crazy.
Yeah.
So why so much? I couldn't get over that. And it was so, like, gross looking.
Yeah.
Like,
It was...
if it was boiling that bad, it's sticking to the pan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Plus, like, oatmeal, grits, porridge, no matter what it is, multi-meal, as soon as it cools down, it is cement in the pan. And you have made
you have
so
to add
much.
You have to add all sorts of, you've got to add butter, sugar, you've got to add milk to make that, like, thin up.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine.
Yes. I had maple syrup. It's delicious.
Oh, yes, that's a good one. Or brown sugar.
Yes. But Prue uses her power to turn the knob and it stops boiling. Literally just walk over to it, Prue.
Yeah, that's laziness.
It's just
but
lazy.
at the same time, you know very well that you would do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, she walks over to it to, like, put some in a bowl anyway. So
You
I'm
do
like,
have
you
a
could have just
point.
turned it off.
You do have a point. I forgot about that. And it was like only one spoonful.
Yes.
It did nothing for that bowl.
Yeah.
Like, there was still so much.
Who is eating 20 servings of oatmeal? I have a question. Phoebe comes in. She's wearing a suit. Piper tells her it's a nice outfit. Prue says very corporate. And Phoebe says, yeah, well, I have to impress my new boss. Hey, how's the arm? Piper says that it itches. And Prue tells her that she has to go to the doctor because it could be infected. Piper said it's not. It's fine. Prue takes the bowl of oatmeal to Piper and sets it on the table. Phoebe says, listen, you, while we're at work, whoa, head rush, while we're at work. Don't even think about going after that thing alone. Prue says, wait, there's no reason to go after it at all. The only innocent to protect here is Piper. Piper says, I thought I was going to die last night. I was totally helpless, and all I could think of was that I was never going to see you guys again. And then suddenly out of nowhere comes Billy, saved me, protected me. That thing took away the person he loved, and he's out there all alone trying to kill it. I can't just do nothing. Prue asks if she would just refrain from doing anything unless they're all together, and asks her to promise. Piper agrees, and Prue tells Phoebe that she'll meet her outside. She goes to leave, and Phoebe says, I'll be right there. Okay, I'm freaking. Piper asks why she's freaking out. And Phoebe says, because I convinced Prue to hire me, and what if I disappoint her? Or what if I screw up and make her look bad? There's a reason my resume is only 3 sentences long, Piper.
Surely it's longer than that.
Yeah, she worked at the Rainbow Room. She worked at the Chelsea Pier or whatever.
Yeah, the hotel.
Yeah, she worked at the hotel as a little psychic. Like, she's got jobs, man. In New York, she had 3 jobs just to afford her social calendar. Piper tells her that she's one of the smartest people that she knows, and she's sure that she will do great. Phoebe asks if she really means it. Piper says she does, and Phoebe says, that makes me feel so much better. Thank you. So Phoebe leaves, and then Piper finds a page in the Book of Shadows about the creature. It is called a Wendigo. So we cut to Buckland's. Phoebe and Prue are in the storeroom looking at some auction items. Phoebe's holding a clipboard. She says, lot number 102, 1 lamp. Estimated value, $2,500. What? It doesn't need light bulbs? Prue says, it's a Stickley, an original. Phoebe says, oh, right, a Stickley.
Like she knows what that is. I don't know what that is.
Me either.
Obviously, it's a
big deal.
Yeah.
It's a $2,500 lamp. She says, I still can't believe none of this stuff belongs to anyone. Prue says, well, every year the city auctions off unclaimed probate items, asset seizures for revenue. Phoebe asks what about the stuff that doesn't sell, and Prue just tells her it gets tossed. She says, what is lot 103? 103, gold bracelet, estimated value $375. I will take that if no one wants it. She picks it up, and it's like a gold bracelet. It's got like a little heart charm on it, and we see the initials TL. So Prue tells her, note that it's inscribed with the initials T and L. All right, that finishes the first grouping. I'm going to go upstairs to appraisals and make sure I didn't forget anything. Meet you back at my office. Phoebe tells her that her mid-morning coffee will be ready and waiting. I really think this is going to work with you and me. Prue says that she does too. And she goes to walk towards the door, and Phoebe picks up that gold bracelet, and she has a premonition of a car driving off the cliff and the bracelet flying out the car window. Phoebe stops her, and she says, I just had a vision of the past. It was a terrible car accident, and this bracelet, it was thrown free. Oh man, I bet I'm supposed to figure out who it belongs to. Prue says, oh, no. Not now. Absolutely not. Phoebe says, I can't help it. Imagine you have a premonition every time you touch something in the auction house.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That would be like they'd go out of business.
Yeah. Yikes.
I could not imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Prue's thinking. Like,
yes.
oh shit, what did I do?
Yeah. Claire walks in and she says that she just wants to make sure everything's in order for today. Phoebe says, wait, the auction is today? Prue says, yes, Claire, everything is in order. Claire says, terrific, I'll see you later then. And then she sees the bracelet that Phoebe's holding. She says, ooh, nice, that should sell quickly. And she leaves. Like, great. Thanks ever so much, Claire, for, like, immediately putting pressure on us to sell this bracelet that we can't sell. Thanks. Phoebe asks what they're going to do, and we cut to Quake. Piper and Billy are there. Piper is telling Billy what she found in the Book of Shadows. Piper says it's called a Wendigo. Apparently it looks like a normal person during the day, but that it transforms at night. It survives by feeding on human hearts. According to my information, the first Wendigo was a mortal who, betrayed by his lover, cut out her heart and ate it. As soon as he did, his own heart turned to ice, and that's how he became this monster. Billy says, so what, it like takes love from others? Is that it? Or then why did it go after you? Are you in love? Piper like kind of laughs, and she says, no. Unfortunately, no. Must be attracted to something else. And Billy says, like maybe beauty?
So corny.
Oh my god.
She felt that too.
Yeah, she's very embarrassed. He says, I'm sorry. It's just you remind me a lot of my fiance.
Also creepy.
That is so creepy. My literal dead fiance.
But he's also like heartbroken, so anything that reminds him.
Don't hit on Piper then, you weirdo.
Very true.
Piper says, anyway, from what I gather, it strikes during the 3 phases of the full moon, which means it may try again tonight. Billy says that's what it did before. Amazing. You know, I've been tracking this thing for 2 months, and in one night you're a PhD in Wendigo. Piper says, well, I've read more about it. I should call Inspector Trudeau, and tell him about this. Billy says, no, Agent Fallon's better. She's been so great to me ever since Laura, and she's already a believer. I'll tell her, okay? So Piper stands up. She, feels a little bit dizzy, and Billy asks if she's okay. Piper brushes it off. She says, I must have just stood up too fast. Will you call me after you see her, please? Billy agrees, and she says, I can help, Billy. I can't tell you exactly how or why, but I just want you to know that I can. You're not in this alone. He says, I know, and then he leaves, and the phone rings. Piper answers it, and it is Andy. He says, just checking to see how you're doing. Piper says, oh, Andy, that's sweet. I'm fine. I'm just a little tired. Andy says, well, you should be at home relaxing. And yet you knew to call her at work, Andy. Interesting. Piper says, I'm okay. Listen, Billy Waters just left. He's on his way to the Federal Building to see Agent Fallon. He has a theory on the attacks. Andy says that he'll let Fallon know and to rest up, stay out of dark, scary places for a while, and asks if she's going to be okay. And she says, okay. And Andy says, take care. They hang up. And at the police station, Agent Fallon is sitting at the desk behind Andy. So he turns around and tells her that Billy's on his way to her office because he has information on the attacks. Fallon says, really? Guess I better go. You seem pretty familiar with the witness. Andy says, Piper? Yeah, I dated her sister. And Fallon says, dated as in past tense? Can we not? I don't want to do that. I'm not feeling the Agent Fallon, Inspector Trudeau love story. I'm not.
I was not either. She was definitely what's the word? Hitting on him.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, and in some parts it's incredibly uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
He asks why, and she says, just curious, wouldn't want a lovesick cop on my hands, especially if that's what the creature's after. Andy asks her what makes her think that it is, and she says, you got a better explanation of why it rips the heart out of its victims? Andy says, maybe. I've just gone over the coroner's reports from Chicago, New Orleans, and now local. It turns out all the victims were AB negative. Fallon says, chosen by blood type? That's a new one. And Andy says, plus they're all killed in 3s. The night before, the night after, and the night of the full moon. Piper would have been the second, only she got away. Agent Fallon says, well, you're right. That means the creature will try again tonight. Andy says, I'm not altogether convinced that it's a quote-unquote creature. The blood types, the full moon, the stolen hearts, it feels like ritual, and ritual is human. It could just be one sick mind behind these crimes. Fallon says, well, maybe we'll have a chance to confirm your theory tonight. You and me, stake it at the park. Interested? Andy says, I'll bring my flare gun.
Like, he was entertaining it.
Yeah.
He really was.
Yeah.
But, he's single, so that's fair.
Yeah, but her vibe was, like, not it to me. It was very,
predatory.
Like, predatory. Yeah.
Yes, predatory.
Like, not...
Which later on, that's fitting.
Yes. Outside the federal building, Billy's there. Agent Fallon comes up and asks if he's looking for her. Billy says, yeah, listen, I think I know what the creature is. Fallon says, really? He says, yeah, well, Piper was telling me about it. It's called a Wendigo, and it feeds off of... Fallon says, whoa, hold on, not here. The other agents already think I'm a little weird. Why don't I walk you to your car and we'll talk on the way? So they walk to a parking garage, and Billy says it's like this Wendigo, and it attacks people in love, or at least people with good hearts. It's sort of like an anti-Cupid. Fallon asks how it knows that about its victims, and Billy says, I don't know, instinct. Maybe it senses something. Look, I know it can take on human form. Maybe it stalks them first. Anyway, I know it's going to attack tonight. I know it. Probably the same park, just like the other cities. Billy takes out a cigarette and a lighter out of his pocket, and he says, yeah, well, we got to get there, stake it out, wait for it to show up, so then we can, and he flicks the lighter on, and Agent Fallon, flinches away, and he says, kill it. Son of a bitch!
Yeah. Her reaction, also, I didn't feel like was very fitting either.
No, it was
weird. Know. It was awkward.
Listen, it's primal, okay? She's literally an animal. She grabs a hold of Billy's head and then breaks his neck immediately, and he falls to the ground. Then we cut to Buckland's. Phoebe's walking up to Prue. She says, Prue, check it out. I found out whose car went off the cliff. Franklin Bates. He worked for a big PI firm in San Jose. Prue asks how she did that, and she said, easy, I recognize the road. Coast Highway by Carmel. I also recognize the car, 65 Lincoln. My first boyfriend, Jimmy, used to drive one just like it, remember? Anyway, so I got on the web and started snooping around, which means that I tied up your phone line while you were at appraisals. I searched the Chronicle's databases for all articles on car accidents in the area, and voila, there it was, February 1989. Unfortunately, it took me a little while to access it, and I sort of forgot to tell you that Claire was looking for you.
It's only a little important.
Yeah, Prue yells at her, and Phoebe says, I'm sorry, but here's the best part. I called the PI firm he worked for, lied to them, told them I was Andy's partner, and they told me what the initials on the bracelet stand for. The T is for Terry, the L is for Lane.
I love how she kind of took it into her own hands. She's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you're literally impersonating an officer.
Yeah.
Whether it is a real officer or not, that's illegal.
Yeah. Prue asks if she should know that name, and Phoebe says, Terry Lane is a 5-year-old girl kidnapped by her father. It was the case the detective was working on when he died. So, I think that the bracelet is proof that he found her, and I think the mother never got it because he died, which means she never found her daughter. We can't sell that bracelet, Prue, not until we know for sure. Prue asks how she's supposed to explain it to Claire. Psychic provenance? Claire comes in at that exact moment and says, psychic what? Prue says, Claire, hi. And she says, I've been looking all over for this bracelet. What's it doing up here? Prue tells her that she had it cleaned. And Claire says, fine, I'll return it downstairs. I've already got 2 buyers interested. And she leaves. Phoebe tells Prue again that they cannot sell the bracelet. Then we move to Quake. Piper's standing near the bar. She's rubbing an ice-cold drink on her forehead. Waitress walks up and gets her attention. And there's a man with her. He asks if she's the manager. She says yes. He says, Lawrence Beck, health department. This is a code inspection. I would like to start with the kitchen. And so they walk in. Piper is sweating buckets. She is so hot right now. So she's walking in. She's stumbling around a little bit. And she says, the counters are scrubbed every 15 minutes. The dishes are washed 150 degrees Fahrenheit with antibacterial detergent. Lawrence asks if she's ill, and she says, no, I don't know. Feel free to look around. We have nothing to hide here at Quake.
She was not feeling it at all.
No. He says thanks, and Piper immediately walks over to the fridge and, like, puts her head in it and then takes some frozen meat and sticks it on her forehead. And the health inspector sees her and asks what she's doing with that meat. And she says, dying.
Which I thought that this scene was perfect for her situation. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I also felt like it was quite random, too. Mm-hmm. But again, it was very fitting because she's not feeling too grand.
Yes. So she gets out of the fridge. It just says, right. And then she hands the meat to a cook and says, chuck that. Lauren says, you're obviously sick. I think you'd better go home, miss, before I shut this restaurant down.
Which I think was very fair of him. Because he could have just flat out been like, okay, we're done.
Yeah. When you're putting your head in the fridge, you psycho. Yeah. Okay.
We're all guilty of that. Just not
at the restaurant, at the place we work.
Let's hope.
While the health inspector is there.
Exactly.
At the parking garage, the police are there where Billy was killed. Fallon gets Andy's attention. Andy asks what happened. Fallon says, I don't know. I came here to meet him and found him there. Andy asks how he died, and Fallon says the coroner hasn't said, but it's definitely homicide. Although there's no mutilation or other physical wounds. Doesn't fit our MO. I suppose it could be random. Okay, let's just think this through. I came here to meet him, and I found him there. In the parking garage?
Yeah, her, demeanor was completely off during this. And I'm kind of surprised that, Andy didn't show any suspicion.
Yeah, Andy's a good cop, so...
But at the same time, she is an FBI agent. Mm-hmm. So maybe, that's kind of
he also keeps hitting on him.
Yeah. But that could be her way of distraction, too.
Yeah. And that's what I mean, is, maybe he's like, oh, she's fine. She likes me, so obviously she's okay, you know? Anyway, Andy says, chases off a crazed killer last night and succumbs to a mugging today. I don't buy it. Fallon says, maybe the creature, or whatever it is, found out Billy had some information on it. Got to him before he could get to me. Andy says, yeah, well, he had been stalking it for 2 months. Could be the killer knew. Fallon says, still, if there are ritual murders as you suggest, all the steps have to be followed or the killer doesn't get his happy feeling. So why is the heart still intact? Andy says there are 2 possibilities. He's not AB negative, or it was trying to protect itself from being found out. He says that he will go with that theory. He says, let's go talk to Piper, see if he told her what he wanted to tell you. Fallon says, you read my mind, Inspector.
She's so creepy during this.
Yes.
All sorts of negative vibes.
Yeah. We cut to Buckland's. The auction has started. The auctioneer's going when Phoebe walks up to Prue. Prue asks where she's been. She says the auction has already started. Phoebe says, I think I found the little girl, Terry Lane. I think she's living in Oakland. She says, I contacted the detective's old secretary. She helped me piece it together. She also told me that it was the little girl's mother who hired him because the father had abducted Terry. We hear the auctioneer say that the next lot is 103, a gold charm bracelet, and the bidding is going to begin at 375. Phoebe says, you've got to do something. That bracelet might be the only way to convince the mother we know where the little girl is. Prue asks what she's supposed to do, and Phoebe, squints her eyes at her to tell her to use her power. So as the auctioneer is going, 375, anyone 375, anyone 375, anytime somebody uses their paddle, Prue uses her power and makes it, fly out of their hand, or fly across the room, or
which I'm
drop it down their lap.
Caught onto that, really.
Yeah.
Okay, what the freakiness is happening right now?
Yeah. The auctioneer, keeps trying, but it does not go. So he's very well. We'll move on to lot 104. The pewter flagon. Phoebe says, thank you, and Prue tells her that she had better be right. At the manor, the doorbell rings and Piper answers it. It is Andy. She asks what he's doing there, and he says, I just wanted to see how you're doing. She says, I feel great. No, she doesn't. Anyway, Andy says, where's your bandage? How'd your wound heal? And all of a sudden, Piper turns into a Wendigo and grabs Andy. And then Piper wakes up. She was on the couch in the living room. She's sweating and she looks real sick.
So did you catch on to that being a dream or no?
When she was when he said, where's your bandage? I think that's when I was like, it's a dream.
Yeah.
But at first I was like, what is happening?
See, I feel like I caught on fairly quick. Mm-hmm. She didn't look like she was sick, and I was like, I feel like this might be a dream or something like for real is about to happen.
Yeah. So the doorbell rings for real, and she walks into the foyer. It's Andy, of course. Piper says, "Andy, go away." He says, "Sorry," and she, cracks the door open. She says, "You can't come in. I've got the flu." He says, "It's okay. I've had a flu shot."
Because that matters.
I gotta talk to you. It's about Billy. He's been killed. Piper is shocked. She opens the door a little more and says, "It's not possible. He should have been saved. It's not even night." Andy tells her that it might not have been whoever had attacked her, and Piper asks who else it could have been when Agent Fallon arrives.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. She said, "Sorry, I had to make a call. Are you okay?" Piper says she does not feel good. Andy suggests that they come back later, and Agent Fallon says, "Just a few questions, if you don't mind. We're wondering if you knew exactly what Billy was coming to tell me." Piper says just that the creature is called a Wendigo and that it attacks during the full moon. He also said it looks like a normal person during the day. Agent Fallon says, "Really? That's new. Did he have any idea who it might be?" Piper says she doesn't think so. And Agent Fallon says, "Too bad. How's the arm?" Piper says it's fine, but it hurts like hell. Agent Fallon takes a look at it and says, "You're the only one to survive the attacks. Hope you didn't get infected by it. If you think of anything at all, call me directly." She hands Piper her card and leaves. Andy tells her to try to get some sleep. Piper says she will. He leaves, and she closes the door, and she starts shaking. She takes the bandage off her arm, and her arm is, covered in hair, and
Yep.
she starts crying.
It's not cute, and I would cry too.
Very sad. At Harriet Lane's apartment, her doorbell rings, and she answers it. Phoebe asks if she is Harriet Lane. Harriet says, "Who are you?" Phoebe says, "Oh, we've never met. I work in an auction house. Actually, I just started today. My sister got me the job." Not the point, Phoebe.
I know. I thought that was very,
self-centered a little bit?
yeah, and kind of, unprofessional. Not that she's being a professional, but
Yeah.
at the same time, that's not what you're there for.
Yeah. She says, "Well, anyway, I sort of found something, and I was wondering if you might recognize it." She holds up the bracelet. Harriet looks at it for a long time and then says, "I've never seen it before." Phoebe asks if she's sure, and Harriet goes to close the door, but Phoebe stops her and says, "Hi. I don't mean to intrude, and I know that this must be hard for you, but I know that you recognize this bracelet. It was your daughter's, wasn't it?" Harriet asks her why she's asking all these questions, and Phoebe asks what her daughter's name was. Harriet says, Terry Lane. Do you know where she is?" So Phoebe takes Harriet out into the hallway, and Prue is standing there with Terry. She says, "Terry? Oh my goodness, Terry? And Terry runs up to her. They hug. Harriet is saying, "I thought I'd never see you again." Terry says, "It's okay, I'm home now." And, I love this moment, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, but where was she? Because, her dad died, so she wasn't with her dad.
Did her dad die?
I thought he died in the car accident.
No, that was the officer.
Oh.
The officer died.
Oh, okay. So maybe
he was
she
on
was
his
with her
way
dad.
to her.
Okay, but still, where was she that she can just go be with her mom now?
Well, my thought is Dad's probably in prison for kidnapping.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave her to someone that he trusted. And maybe they didn't know the full situation.
Or maybe Prue and Phoebe got him arrested.
Well,
because they've been working with the secretary.
My thought is she did not look like she was 18.
Mm-mm.
She looked younger. So how did they get her?
Yeah.
Did they kidnap her?
Literally.
You know what I mean?
Was she in foster care? Was she, with an aunt? What is happening? And if she
Yeah,
was, why did nobody call her mom?
I wish that Phoebe gave more, background story.
Yes.
Or that there was more background story. Maybe the mom's where have you been? And
yeah.
And maybe the girl didn't know either. I don't know. But I do feel that there could have been more to that.
Agreed. Prue tells Phoebe that she guesses that bracelet was worth more than she thought. And Phoebe says, "Are you kidding? It's priceless. Thank God for my powers." And Prue says, "It wasn't just your powers that did that, Phoebes." Prue's phone rings, and it's Piper. She says, "You sound terrible. What's wrong?" We cut to the park with Andy and Agent Fallon. Fallon is saying, "I sure hope Piper's going to be okay. She didn't look very well." Andy says, "I know. Both Piper and the first victim were attacked by the far end of those trees." Fallon says, "Must have hidden in that stretch of woods waiting to attack. Want to get a closer look?" Andy agrees, and Agent Fallon pulls out her cell phone, turns it off, and says, "You better turn your cell phone off too. Wouldn't want it to ring and scare it away." Then, as they walk to the spot, she says, "This is a nice spot. How'd you find this place? You and Piper's sister spend some time here?" Andy says, "No. Prue runs more to the highbrow." Fallon says, "Her loss." Andy asks if she's married, and Fallon says, "Do you see a ring on my finger? I was engaged once. He was my world. Totally my world. Then one day, boom, the empty dresser, the one-word note. Sorry. I started falling. I kept falling. But I took steps. I did what I needed to make myself strong, to make it so no one could ever hurt me like that again." Andy says, "I'd love to know how you do that." And Fallon says, "Maybe I'll show you if you're lucky. Now my life's a lot less complicated. All I'm interested in is sex." And then Andy, makes a face. And she says, "Does that shock you?" Andy says, "No. Just wondering where you were when I was in college. That's all."
I thought that was great. That was a good little comeback there.
Gosh.
He's not really interested now, but he would have been.
Yeah. At the manor, Prue and Phoebe walk in. They call for Piper, and Piper is sitting on the couch. She's sweating and shaking. Piper says, "I'm miserable." They try to comfort her, and she pulls off the bandage and shows them her hairy arm. Prue asks if she can get up, and Piper says, "Back off. What do you think, I can't walk now?" Phoebe says, "Honey, we're just trying to help you." And Piper says, "Help me? You can't even hold down a job."
Ouch.
Prue says, "Okay, wait a minute, Piper." Piper says, "Oh, save it. Do you always have to be in charge?" And then she pauses and says, "I'm so sorry. What's happening to me?" Prue says, "It's all right. We're going to take care of you." Phoebe sees Agent Fallon's card on the table. She picks it up, and she has a premonition of Agent Fallon turning into a Wendigo. They ask her what, and she says, "I just saw who the Wendigo is. Agent Fallon." Piper says, "Her? I thought it had to be a him." Phoebe says, "I guess not. And even worse, I saw her and Andy at the park at night, alone." Prue says that she's going to call and warn him, and tells them to go upstairs to the Book of Shadows and see if they see. Prue says that she's going to call and warn him, and tells Phoebe to go upstairs to the Book of Shadows and see if she can find a way to help Piper. In the attic, Phoebe and Piper are looking through the book, and Piper says, "Nothing. It's just the same crap I've already seen." Okay.
She's a little testy.
Yeah. Prue says she tried Andy's cell phone, but there was no answer. And Phoebe says, "Well, we can't find anything about reversing the Wendigo thing." Prue says, "Well, there has to be something." And she looks at the bottom of this page, and she says, "Didn't you check this? It's CF Desperata. I think it's Latin. I don't know." And Phoebe says, "Yeah, we're supposed to know what that means." And Prue tells her it's Latin for look up things that are yearned for. Piper says, yeah, you're so very smart."
Getting testy.
Yeah, Prue says, "Piper." And Piper says, "Don't Piper me, just shut up." And Prue says, "No, you're going to listen to me. This is not you, all right? It's the blood of the Wendigo, and you have to fight it." Piper says, "It's so strong." And Prue says, "You're stronger." She says, "All right, things that are yearned for. Wisdom, balance, unbecoming. That's got to be it." And she turns to another page and says, "All right, unbecoming a Wendigo. So we have to kill the Wendigo that slashed you by melting its heart of ice." Piper asks what if they can't find her, and Phoebe says, "We'll find her. She's going to be at the park tonight." Piper asks, "What if you're wrong? What if you don't? Then you'll have to kill me." Prue says, "Don't be ridiculous, Piper. We're not going to kill you." Phoebe says, "We're going to kill the thing that did this to you." And Prue suggests that they can fine her until they get back, so they're going to tie her down. Piper says, "No, go to hell." Prue asks Phoebe if she has any chains, and Phoebe says, "I actually think I do have something." And she comes back with a pair of handcuffs.
Yeah, at least they weren't fuzzy.
True. Prue asks where she got those, and says, "Never mind." They handcuff Piper to a pipe, and she sits on a chair. And Phoebe says, "We still need to take a trip to the Army-Navy store to get a flare gun." Piper says, "Screw you, bitch." And Phoebe says, "Okay, I think we need to hurry." At the park with Andy and Agent Fallon, she's saying, "What's the matter?" He said, "I think I was just thinking that I'm probably not the best cop to be on the stakeout with, seeing as I'm AB negative." She says, "Don't worry, I'll protect you." And we cut to the attic. Piper is sweating. She screams, her eyes turn yellow, and then she turns into a Wendigo.
So, I did not like that transition at all. Like, I liked how her eyes turned yellow, but her growling was not good. Like, at all. Like, the facial expressions were not, like, it didn't go with it.
Have you liked a single transition in the show so far?
Probably not.
I don't think so.
You know, I'm going to be hopeful that it gets better. As of right now, I am being let down. Like, how hard was it for her to, like, really growl? Like, it was a very loud growl, but her facial expressions, like, her lips, like, barely curled.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing going on.
That's fair.
I was very disappointed in it.
Well, she breaks the pipe and the handcuffs, and then we cut back to the park, and it is night. Ashley, Agent Fallon's first name, asks if Andy is doing okay, and he says, I'm a little on edge. And we see Agent Fallon's hand turn into a Wendigo hand. She says, instinct of the hunt. That's why you're here. That's why you're a cop. He asks if this turns her on or something, and she says, or something. Andy says, look, you're a gorgeous woman, but we're on this job together. Let's just leave it at that.
I love how he shuts her down.
Yeah. She says, let's not. And then she turns into a Wendigo. Andy gets out his gun and tries to shoot her, but she hits him across the head. Cut to Prue and Phoebe. They pull up in Prue's car. Phoebe says, okay, if the moon's over there, then we should go that way. Prue says that she doesn't see Andy's car. Phoebe tells her not to worry. And then we cut back to Andy and the Wendigo. Andy is unconscious on the ground. The Wendigo rips open his shirt and cuts him down the chest with his fingernail. Which is a scene I never like. Like, in any show where they're like, the monster is like slicing you open with their fingernail. I'm like, that is disgusting.
But I do have to give them credit. There was blood
At
bubble.
least there was blood.
There was blood bubble. I was like, thank you.
Anyway, the Wendigo hears Prue calling for Andy and runs away. Phoebe says, this is definitely the place. I recognize it from my premonition. The Wendigo growls and starts running towards them. Prue gets out the flare gun. She shoots, but she misses. It scares the Wendigo and it runs away. And she tells Phoebe to give her another one. Phoebe says, if that didn't get Andy to come out, he's dead already. Prue says, he's dead when we find a body, not before.
Like, bitch, don't even.
Literally, don't just say that. Prue loads the flare gun again, and the Wendigo runs towards them. She fires the flare gun, scares the Wendigo again, and says, okay, how many more do we have? Phoebe says, 2. Prue says, 2? And Phoebe says, that's all they had. Wait, I think that's him. And they see Andy on the ground, so they run over. And Prue says, all right, he's alive, but she slashed him. Phoebe asks if he still has his heart, and Prue says, yeah, we must have driven her off just in time. The Wendigo growls and appears behind them. They turn around and Prue fires the flare gun and it runs away. Phoebe says, last one, my turn. This time we don't fire until I see the slobber on its face.
I love that she said that because Prue does not have aim.
Literally. Like, I'm like, Prue, get it together.
Yes.
Prue says, it's over there. And Phoebe says, no, wait, it's over there. And then we see 2 Wendigos running towards them. Of course we do. Phoebe asks how it can be in 2 places at once. And Prue says, it can't. One of them is Piper. Shoot. Phoebe says that she can't. And Prue says, just shoot and pray you hit the right one. Phoebe shoots the flare at the Wendigo and it freezes in midair. And the other Wendigo is frozen.
Which clearly shows that she was getting ready to kill Piper.
Yes. Phoebe says, Piper froze it. Do something. Prue uses her power and moves the flare and hits the other Wendigo in the heart. It burns and disappears. And Piper turns back into a person and realizes she's naked. So she goes to hide behind a tree.
What did you think about how the Wendigo was ended?
I just wish that things took more time.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like every episode is like story, and then the last 5 minutes is them actually dealing with the big bad and getting rid of it in like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, I just want it to like take some effort.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, it definitely, there's not a whole lot of action in that area, in that scene when there should be.
Yeah.
I also feel like her disappearing could have been more to that as well. Like, she could have like went up in flames
Mm-hmm.
and then ashed away.
Yeah.
Instead of just vanishing.
Yeah. Phoebe asks if she's okay, and Piper says, I think so, but I'm naked and I'm freezing. We see Andy's wound heal, and Prue runs over to him and asks if he's okay. Andy says, what happened? Prue, what are you doing here? Where's the Wendigo? And he tries to get up. Prue says, she's gone. Easy. Lie back down. Just lay back down. It's all right. I'll explain everything later. We cut to Quake. Phoebe and Prue are sitting at a table. Piper brings them some drinks. She says, it's on the house for saving my hide. Phoebe says, literally, you Wendigo, you. Prue asks if she's okay to work, and Piper says, yeah, I'm fine. It's like nothing ever happened, except for Billy. Prue says, well, no way you could have known about Agent Fallon. Piper says, I know. I'm just not used to losing an innocent we're supposed to protect. Phoebe says he just wanted to help stop her so she couldn't hurt anybody else, and that's exactly what he did. Prue tells Piper that she's just glad that she's safe. Piper says, and Andy. By the way, what did you tell him about why we were all there? Prue says, I told him the truth. Phoebe says, get out. Prue says, I did. I said what he saw happened was true, that Agent Fallon really was the Wendigo, and had we not vanquished her, that both he and Piper would have been killed. I couldn't think of anything else to say. Piper asks what he said, and Prue said, not much. He was either too stunned to speak or he actually believed me on some level. It was the closest thing we have ever come to having an honest conversation. Phoebe says, so maybe Andy's more open to you being a witch than you think. Prue says, all right, let's get back to work.
She's like, I don't want to entertain that idea.
Yeah. Phoebe says, actually, I need to talk to you about something, and please don't be mad, but I quit. It's not that I don't appreciate the opportunity, because I do. It's just that every time I touch something at Buckland's, I risk having a premonition. It's just too emotional for me. Besides, that's your world. I need to find one of my own. Prue says, you will. And Piper says, just stay out of my world or I'll kill you.
Like, she says it with so much venom.
Yeah. And Prue and Phoebe, look at her. They're worried. They're confused. And Piper gets up and starts to walk away. She turns around and she says, kidding. It's just a joke.
And she says it so innocently.
Yes.
It was great.
All right, Elizabeth, who is your Witch of the Week?
So, my Witch of the Week is Phoebe, because this was the first time that she admits that she loves her power.
Mm-hmm.
In all the other episodes, she's struggling with why she got the premonition power.
Yeah.
And her seeing the mother and daughter together, I think really solidified that for her. And the fact that not only did she bring, a mother and daughter back together after years of being apart, but she's also the one that discovered who the Wendigo was, and she saved Piper in the end.
Yeah.
So who was your Witch of the Week?
I think, the Witch of the Week obviously has to be Phoebe, but I did like a lot of Prue's moments as well. I really liked her, using her powers on the paddles, and, doing her best and, really supporting Phoebe, even though it was putting her job at risk, and, really lifting her up and lifting Piper up, saying, you're stronger than the Wendigo, it wasn't just your powers that did that. She had a lot of, really good moments.
She was very encouraging.
Yeah, I do think, my overall Witch of the Week is Phoebe for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, but I just wanted to, give a little shout out to Prue. Unfortunately, I think Piper, not my favorite this episode.
She was the least.
Yeah.
Even though it kind of centered around her, didn't really do much. So.
Yeah. And, I feel like we just didn't get a ton of, okay, but who was the Wendigo attacking? People in love? People AB negative?
Or could it be both?
Both? What is the...
we didn't really hear a whole lot of history.
Yeah.
We found out what it was and how it became, but not a whole lot of history behind it.
Yeah, I just wish we would have seen, a little bit more. I wish they would give whatever the monster of the week is more time. Let it breathe a little bit.
Yeah. Give us some credit.
Yeah. So.
That is it for today's episode of Spells and Spoilers. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and follow us on Instagram at Spells and Spoilers and TikTok at Spells and Spoilers Pod for more. We'll be back next time with more supernatural fun. See you later.
Bye.